So we're going to be returning to finishing the second half of video 2. I spent a few hours reviewing 2008 gameplay, and I actually haven't found a big name yet who I'm comfortable saying was not cheating. So I'm going to start this video by introducing Rokke's second theorem, which simply states that if all of the big Halo 3 names were cheating in 2008, they were probably never legit, even in Halo 2. But that's an issue for later. So we're going to start here with the last two clips from the last video. First, I'm going to explain how I knew this might be an aimbot almost immediately. And what gives it away is this little snapback in his aim when he's behind top mid, right there. That little snapback. Because players don't usually make minor or sharp little movements when they're behind a wall. There's no point to it. He's planning to jump. He has no idea what the visual field is going to be like back there, or who he's going to be shooting, or where his aim's going to be moving. And since I do know that Strongside was cheating in this tournament, I can assume that one of the two positions on this snapback was actually on this player that he's targeting. So either this spot or this spot. And then what gives it away after that is that just before he jumps, or right after he jumps, his aim is going to go like this. And he does it in a really fine and gradual way. That's a pretty fine adjustment for the 360, and not one that you're likely to see when a player is behind a wall. Because players just aren't going to try to make fine adjustments like that for no reason.
They'd get a cap. Decent at, they'd get a cap. They'd get a cap. Decent at, they'd get a cap.
See how Zame does that? I'm pretty comfortable saying that could easily be one of those compensatory movements that the aimbot makes to look less obvious. So I'm not exactly sure why I wanted to show you this. I did want to show you how obvious this stuff has become to me after I studied it. And I like showing to the aimbot programmers that they're probably never going to be able to hide this from me. They probably will be able to watch my videos and improve the current aimbots being used in the more popular titles. But that's not really my problem. And at this point, just based on what I've seen in Halo 3, going possibly back all the way to the early 2000s, it's almost a guarantee that all of the popular games on Twitch are being cheated at. Not just on Twitch, but probably at the tournaments too. At any rate, so from here Strongside makes the little gradual curling movement. A movement that's pretty hard to make on the 360. And he does it for no reason, as I talked about at the end of the last video. And then this was the last clip from video 2. Just to clarify what I'm talking about in this one. Strongside manages to input these 5 separate, distinctly axial movements, with hardly any blending, in just a little over a third of a second. And those movements are fast, which means he has to be pushing the thumbstick an appreciable distance down each axis. So you just have to ask yourself, can you reach those speeds in 5 different directions, returning the thumbstick almost to the neutral dead zone before the next movement, and then do that 5 times in less than 400 milliseconds? It's best to test this with a 360 controller because they did have large dead zones. And if you do that, you're going to see that this movement is not possible. It's these short, sharp, axial movements. And how fast they are. So from about here, Strongside goes on to make fast axial movements, and there are actually 5 of them. So in slow motion, you can see the 5 distinct movements. So this one was maybe not axial. It is at the end of the movement though. So I'm going to count it because he would have been pressing completely down at this point. So axial down, left, down, left, up. One more time. So he's going to go down, left, down, left, up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And a couple of these movements are maybe slightly rounded on the corners, but for the most part they're purely axial, and they're very fast. And it's not actually possible to do these that fast without blending them together. Because to get these speeds, you actually have to push the thumbstick a certain distance. But before you do the next one, the thumbstick needs to more or less return to the center. So honestly, all I think you need to do to prove this to yourself is to break out your 360 controller and input these 5 axial movements in this time frame. So here we go, 5 separate movements.
Been trying to return their first.
Let me know how it goes. I can't really make out what the players are saying here, but I somewhat doubt that even with a call out, that strong side would have made this purposeful of a movement here.
Rifle, heaven and earth, they're setting up a push here, fellas.
Yeah, notice how strong side's just jumping backwards. He's going to wait for his teammates to get in the lobby right now and now.
Alive here for rifle, heaven and earth, they're setting up a push here, fellas.
Yeah, notice how strong side's just jumping backwards. He's going to wait for his teammates to get in the lobby right now and now.
Rifle, heaven and earth, they're setting up a push here, fellas.
Yeah, notice how strong side's just jumping backwards. He's going to wait for his teammates to get in the lobby right now and now.
Alive here.
So yeah, that one's pretty self-explanatory. So this clip's pretty weird. I think his motion stops more suddenly than is normal. Again, there are no drop frames. See how suddenly he comes to a stop. And then after that, and I don't think this is from him hitting the railing here, because right after this he seems to move right.
On their push. Alive here for Carbon as they come back on their push.
So yeah, pretty weird. You can't change directions that fast in Halo 3 normally. The Master Chief is kind of fat in Halo 3, and he slides at the end of his strafe a little bit. This could be another instance of an aimbot controlling a player's motion, like the one we saw with Ashes, where it's actually causing the player to come to a stop faster than is normal. And that's the type of thing that could be a smoking gun, once myself or someone else takes the time to study that more in depth. Here we have Walshy with what is just an improbable aiming movement.
Push. Push. And push. And
after he shoots at the first target, even though he knows that target is back there, he unzooms.
push.
And then while unzoomed, he snaps to and perfectly off-tracks this player's center line.
And push.
Before zooming again and firing.
Push. And wall. Push. And
So not hard evidence by any means, but something that's so hard to do on the 360 that even if you're a great player, something like that is basically going to be random. In this clip, Walshy is obviously trying to shoot the guy behind the afro, but his aim moves directly to a second player.
As long as he stays alive, he is going to be the distraction. As long as he stays alive, he is going to be the distraction. And as long as he stays alive, he is going to be the distraction. And by doing that, they can get an easy flag. As long as he stays alive, he is going to be the distraction. And by doing that, they can get an easy flag.
The movements after that are obviously a little wonky. And some of the acceleration there I don't really like. But there's nothing technically wrong there, as far as I know. If I had a nickel for every terrible rocket that I've seen from great players, including players in this tournament who I keep seeing fail and choke with the rocket, something that I rarely, if ever, do, as supposedly a far inferior player, I don't just find it amusing, but it makes me start to wonder. I did have an old Halo 3 buddy who was very good, and even better at Halo 2. And we used to joke around a lot because he would choke with the rockets. So I do know it's possible to be very good at the game, but just kind of struggle with the rocket for some reason. But yeah, the stuff from the Twitch cheaters, and then some of the stuff that I've seen in this tournament from the supposed best players ever, honestly just makes me laugh sometimes. So here we have an interesting and potentially significant rocket from SK. It's not the worst rocket I've ever seen, but it doesn't even hurt his target. And it's this little adjustment before he fires it that interests me. Because that movement shows that he knew he was at risk of hitting that obstacle if he fired the rocket that he wanted to. So he makes this adjustment and then he fires the rocket anyway, which was just barely interesting enough for me to throw it in here, because it does seem a little bit like what an aimbot would do there. This is our first clip from Captain Anarchy. His reticle is very twitchy here, and again I'm checking all of these for frame drop, and there is none in this clip.
Spawn lobby, and he's getting pushed heavy, top middle, having to back down here from Walshy and crew. Spawn lobby, and he's getting pushed heavy, top middle, having to back down here from Walshy and Spawn lobby, and he's getting pushed heavy, top middle, having to back down here from.
So it's not just about how sharp and flicky these are. It's that all three snaps are that sharp and that accurate even when he doesn't have aim assistance.
Spawn lobby, and he's getting pushed heavy, top middle, having to back down here from Walshy and crew. Spawn lobby, and he's getting pushed heavy, top middle, having to back down here from Walshy and.
So the twitchiness combined with the accuracy, combined with no missing frames, is enough to raise my eyebrows there. Here we have Walshy with a target switch that's so ill-advised it's possibly suspicious.
Walshy and crew trying to pull. Walshy and crew trying to pull a flag. SK's going to pull it. Walshy trying to do some work. Walshy and crew trying to pull a flag. SK's going to pull it. Walshy trying to do some work from.
If you've watched and understood my previous videos on the MCC aimbot, you know that we see this a lot, where there's nonsensical target switching, or where the aimbot can't decide which player to shoot. Two of the nonsensical target switches that I see it make a lot leads me to believe that sometimes it prioritizes based on power weapons, even when, just because one of the players has the sniper rifle, it doesn't necessarily make sense that the player would switch to shooting at them. And the other prioritization that I see it make a lot is switching to the closest player, which is probably what happened to Walshy here, because anybody that plays Halo knows that it's just muscle memory for you. When the shit hits the fan like it does for Walshy in this clip, you instinctively prioritize the kill you think you can finish before you die.
Walshy and crew trying to pull a flag. SK's going to pull it. Walshy trying to do some work. Walshy and crew trying to pull a flag. SK's going to pull it. Walshy trying to do some work from.
We can actually see here that this target switch happens probably exactly when strong side becomes the closest player.
Walshy and crew trying to pull a flag. SK's going to pull it. Walshy trying to do some work. Walshy and crew trying to pull a flag. SK's going to pull it. Walshy trying to do. Walshy and crew trying to pull a flag. SK's going to pull it. Walshy trying to do some.
So yeah, poor tactical decision making to the point you basically have to say the target switch was an accident. This is our first clip from Cypher. Here he has 3 quick axial movements that aren't nearly as bad as the ones we saw earlier from strong side, but are still a little suspicious. He has a little vibration up and down in his aim, and when you slow it down, it's the same up down, frame by frame movement we saw from Nated and Soldier.
Finally get that last cap. Finally get that last cap. Finally get that last cap.
So he first acquires this player with 3 fast axial movements.
Finally get that last cap. 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 Finally get that last cap.
And then
Finally
you can
get that
see the
last
little
cap.
vertical vibration as he gets the kill.
We got Cypher going up against Chicks.
Finally get that last cap.
We got Cypher going up.
Basically on the last
Finally
shot.
get that last cap.
We got Cypher going up.
So it was much less noticeable that time than it was with Nated, where the up-down movements were much more pronounced. But if you slow it down, it's still up, down, up, down. And considering how pronounced that was in the Nated and Soldier clips, I'm starting to suspect that that effect could actually be the aimbot dampening the recoil. And if that's the case, spotting this aimbot and proving its usage might be as easy as showing that sometimes their recoil is not normal, because the normal recoil in Halo 3 is just a very small soft movement up, and proving this aimbot may be as simple as showing that the aimbot is moving the reticle down after each bullet, which might actually be what's causing that. Obviously that's something I'm going to be looking into later, or someone else can do it if they want.
Up against
And
Chicks.
then here
Strong
at the
side once again
end,
helping. Oh!
he was probably going to hit that,
Finally get that last cap.
which is just fun.
We got Cypher going up against Chicks. Strong side once again helping. Oh, and they're gonna.
This clip is from Soldier 187. It's just very wonky aim, with an odd hiccup in his aim the last time that his reticle was close to this player.
They're going to keep the flag alive. This is huge for Carbon here as they're running across top middle and Soldier 187 and they're going to keep the flag alive. This is huge for Carbon here as they're running across top middle and Soldier 187 and they're going to keep the flag alive. This is huge for Carbon here as they're running across top middle and Soldier 187 and they're going to keep the flag alive. This is huge for Carbon here as they're running across top middle and Soldier 187 and
All the
In this clip, we see Walshy spinning around after he scores a flag, and he snaps to a player cross map, but doesn't fire at them.
all the guys that could possibly have stopped that flag.
all right, so Carbon showing a little bit of life. They're on the board.
All the guys that could possibly have stopped that flag.
All right, so Carbon showing a little bit of life. They're on the board.
All the guys that could possibly have stopped that flag.
All right, so Carbon showing a little bit of life. They're on the board.
In this clip, we have Walshy with 3 axial movements that are not blended.
2 flags at this point, but there was a fumble. Chig unable to pick it up. 2 flags at this point,
As
but
he
there was a
acquires the
fumble.
last
Chig
target.
unable to pick it up. Soldier 186. Fucker. 2 flags at this point, but there was a fumble. Chig unable to pick it up. Soldier 186.
Here we have Cypher making a rare movement, where he snaps sharply past the target, and then snaps back the opposite direction, but he shoots on the second movement and not the first, and then he follows that up with a sharp curling movement, of a size and fast consistent speed that is very aimbot indicative.
Get fucking rocket. Put it in your dictionary.
Simple math.
Yeah. Get fucking rocket. Put it in your dictionary.
So there he
Simple
goes
math.
past
Yeah.
the target
Get
and
fucking
doesn't
rocket.
fire
Put it in your
until the
dictionary.
second time.
Simple math.
Yeah. Get fucking
So
rocket.
that's pretty weird.
Put it in your dictionary.
Simple math.
Yeah. Get fucking rocket. Put it in your dictionary.
Simple math.
Yeah. Get fucking rocket. Put it in your dictionary.
Simple math.
Yeah.
So something like that should be pretty rare. Almost always when you see someone make that sharp and that purposeful of a movement with the sniper, they're going to be shooting at the person. They don't usually go back and forth across the target and then shoot the second time. After that, you're going to see his aim pin to this player's knee. And this is a relatively short pin. They get significantly more noticeable than this. But sniper pins, even when they're that short, like this pin is only 2 or 3 frames long. But any sniper pinning is another very reliable aimbot indicator. If you watch legit gameplay, when a player and their target's movement is not mirrored, the sniper reticle very rarely pins to one part of the body. Even during very nice, very controlled snipes, the reticle floats freely around the target's body quite a bit.
Get fucking rocket. Put it in your dictionary.
Simple math.
Yeah. Cypher going to
You can see right before the firing movement,
get fucking
his aim
rocket.
pinned very
Put it in your
briefly to
dictionary.
this player's
Simple
knee.
math.
Yeah. Cypher going to get fucking rocket. Put it in your dictionary.
Simple math.
Yeah. Get fucking rocket. Put it in your dictionary.
Simple math.
Yeah.
In a situation like this, where the player and their target are jumping in opposite directions, even this length of pinned sniper aim is very rare. Just those few frames. Like I said, this one's not that bad. We'll probably see some pretty bad ones in this tournament. And then the curling movement during the firing movement is very suspicious.
Cypher going to work. Get fucking rocket. Put it in your dictionary.
Simple math.
Yeah. Cypher going to work.
You can see how it's a very fast, very small, very smooth curling movement. And when you see those tiny, fast, smooth circles in 360 gameplay, it's almost always going to be an aimbot. That type of movement is similar to ones we've seen in this tournament from several players, including Nated and Soldier, who are 2 of the more obvious cheaters at this tournament so far.
Get fucking rocket. Put it in your dictionary.
Simple math.
Yeah. Cypher going to work with the
Here we have Dursky snapping to a player on accident at considerable range. He then has vertical chop in his aim and some extra shooting.
mark. As soon as that flag is returned, if it isn't scored, the game will end and Heaven and Earth will become the winners of game 1. And Chigga mark. As soon as that flag is returned, if it isn't scored, the game will end and Heaven and Earth will become the winners of game 1. And mark. As soon as that flag is returned, if it isn't scored, the game will end and Heaven and Earth will become the winners of game 1. And Chigga.
So this is a clip that could be normal, and maybe I'm only including this one because by this point of the tournament I know Strong Side is cheating. But there is a sharpness and a little bit of a grab to this movement, And when you couple that with how predictive the movement is, the fact that it's lined up with an exotic movement, and that the final snap is to very close to head level, it becomes a bit suspicious. But yeah, I might have included this one because I already know that strong side is cheating, based primarily on the two clips that we talked about at the start of the video.
Number one, if they take this game, game number two. Number one, if they take this game, game. Number one, if they take this game, game. Number one, if they take this game, game number two. Number one, if they take this game, game number two. Number one, if they take this game. Number one, if they take this game, game.
So yeah, it's a sharp movement, and it's what I call a rounded box. And it's the speed coupled with how accurate the movement was. And it just so happens to be to head level and predictive.
Number one, if they take this game, game number two.
And it's similar to what I said about T-squared in the last video, that everything in that clip would be normal in isolation. But it's the fact that these suspicious movements exist in everything that these players are doing. Here, Soldier's aim is pretty weird. Lots of times when there's a back and forth movement, or the speed of the movements in both directions matches pretty much exactly, that's a common aimbot indicator. Like, I can just see a clip like this and tell that it's probably an aimbot, because I've watched enough legit gameplay to know that this just doesn't look right.
Finally, Soldier cleaning up the kill, and Heaven Earth just 2 kills away now. Finally, Soldier cleaning up the kill, and Heaven Earth just 2 kills away now. Finally, Soldier cleaning up the kill, and Heaven Earth just 2 kills away now.
Now that I'm trying to explain this stuff to people, I would say what's wrong with this movement is that the back and forth is too consistent of a speed. It's very unlikely that you're going to be uncoordinated with your movement at the same speed in both directions. And there's also a lack of acceleration. His aim's not really going back and forth like someone using a thumbstick. It's just kind of ping-ponging back and forth. And his speed is below his maximum sensitivity. It's just odd that you're going to be that inaccurate, but the way you're moving the thumbstick is equally inaccurate in both directions.
Finally, Soldier cleaning up the kill, and Heaven Earth just 2 kills away now.
It's probably also rare for that level of uncoordination to not involve any vertical component. But yeah, I'm not sure how else to describe why this clip is suspicious to me. But this is the type of thing that when I see it, I can say, yeah, that doesn't look normal.
Finally, Soldier cleaning up the kill, and Heaven Earth just 2 kills away now.
In this clip, we see some wonkiness and some sharp chopping movements, including a stab towards this player through the wall that goes back and forth. In this clip, we have Dursky with some very wonky aim, including some sharp back and forths that are getting pretty suspicious on their own, given their small size and high speed. He also has a near instantaneous kick-out recovery in here, and then at the end we're going to see him extra shoot.
Captain Anarchy, you're checking out, it looks like my buddy Dursky with the faux hawk rocking over. Captain Anarchy, you're checking out, it looks. Captain Anarchy, you're checking out.
When he first targets
Captain
this
Anarchy,
player,
you're checking out.
that
Captain
reticle
Anarchy,
movement back and
you're
forth is
checking
pretty
out,
sharp
it
and
looks.
pretty fast.
Captain Anarchy, you're checking out.
And you can see that his aim snaps right to this player immediately
Captain
after he
Anarchy,
gets kicked out.
you're Captain Anarchy, you're checking out. It looks Captain Anarchy, you're checking out. It looks like Captain Anarchy, you're checking out.
When you get kicked out of scope in Halo and you're making an aiming adjustment, you don't immediately hit the player anyways. That's not how Halo works.
Captain Anarchy, you're checking out. It looks like my buddy Dursky with the faux hawk rocking over on.
And then we have the extra shot at the
Captain
end.
Anarchy, you're checking out. It looks like my buddy Dursky with the faux hawk rocking.
You can see before this burst is even done, he's already turning and running away.
Rocking over on.
This extra shot is not nearly as bad as the ones that we saw from Dursky on Narrows, because this is actually a situation where people will do this when they're expecting to take an engagement and then they decide that they have to turn and run. But again, with some of this stuff, it's just about how things start to add up. This clip is from Captain Anarchy. He turns right to a player and locks onto him, and then his aim goes off the target sharply, gets wonky, and then there's a very suspicious release as he loses line of sight.
And it looks like Heaven and Earth, they weren't really going for that flag. And it looks like Heaven and Earth, they weren't really going for that flag. And it looks like Heaven and Earth, they weren't really going for that flag they're using. And it looks like Heaven and Earth, they weren't really going for that flag they're using. And it looks like Heaven and Earth, they
Probably
weren't
an
really
extra
going
shot
for that
as
flag
well.
they're using the first. And it looks like Heaven and Earth, they weren't really going for that flag they're using the first. And it looks like Heaven and Earth, they weren't really going for that flag they're using the.
And I would say a hesitation.
And it looks like Heaven and Earth, they weren't really going for that flag they're using.
So yeah, it shouldn't take you watching very much, even of your own gameplay. Your gameplay doesn't really have to be anything special to study most of this, which is a criticism that I've gotten a lot, even though I was ranked like 200 probably. So, but you should be able to see at this point that lots of this stuff that they're doing doesn't really have anything to do with how good you are at the game. It's just a matter of things like, should your target going behind a wall cause your aim to snap and release and fly around? You don't have to be a good player in order to have gameplay to study, such that you can convince yourself that this stuff is not normal. This clip's not that bad. It's Cypher with wonky aim, doing a little bit of that. The aimbot's going to move the reticle in the wrong direction really sharply. And then despite being wonky, he makes a very sharp snap into an off-tracking movement that happens to be a very good lead on this target.
The first team on the board.
Well, right now you can see strong side again.
The first team on the board.
Well, right now you can see strong side again.
The first team on the board.
Well, right now you can see strong side again.
The first team on the board.
Well, right now you can see strong side again.
It's just kind of a hard snap when you're not snapping to the player. You're snapping to a perfect off-tracking position.
The first team on the board.
Well, right now you can see strong side again.
The first team on the board.
Well, right now you can see strong side again.
The first team on the board.
Well, right now you can see strong side again.
The first team on the board.
Well, right now you can see strong side again.
That type of hard snap you're usually going to associate with being on target. You're not usually going to see people hard snap to off-tracking movements.
The first team on the board.
Well, right now you can see strong side again.
Here we have Dursky hard snapping to a player's center line cross map. His aim then goes wonky as his target goes behind an obstacle, and then his aim resets. These kind of resets, a very bad one I've shown from Tylenol, and then in this tournament, a bad one from Ashes. You're not going to see in legit gameplay. I'm pretty confident about that. But I could see people watching those and being like, yeah, that could happen normally. And while that is probably true, I've never seen it from a player that's not cheating.
I'm just gonna stay alive in that. I'll go ace. Top in, bottom 8, Pat, stay alive. Watch your 8 out, possibly. I'm just gonna stay alive in that. I'll go ace. Top in, bottom 8, Pat, stay alive. Watch your 8 out, possibly. I'm just gonna stay alive in that. I'll go ace. Top in, bottom 8, Pat, stay alive. Watch your 8 out, possibly. I'm just gonna stay alive in that. I'll go ace. Top in, bottom 8, Pat, stay alive. Watch your 8 out, possibly. I'm just gonna stay alive in that.
So first here, we see him snap to this player's center line.
I'll go ace. I'm just gonna stay alive in that. I'll go ace.
Or like the last clip from Cypher, he actually appears to be snapping to the correct lead on this target.
I'm just gonna stay alive in that. I'll go ace. Top in, bottom 8, Pat, stay alive. Watch your 8 out, possibly.
That reset there at the end is not nearly as bad as the one that we saw from Ashes in video 1. And really, if you didn't find the one from Ashes suspicious, I'm not really sure what I can say about that type of movement that's going to convince you, except that you just need to go watch some of your own gameplay and see if you ever see anything like that, because you're not going to. This one is not that bad. This one's pretty borderline. But that one from Ashes in video 1, in the first time stamped clip from him, was really bad. I can confidently say you're never going to see something like that in your own gameplay, no matter how much of it you watch. Here we have Captain Anarchy apparently trying to shoot at the player on the floor by accidentally snapping to the center line of the player on the bridge.
Our street's a corner. Soldier. On him in. And then our street's a corner. Soldier. On him in. And there's a guy beating us. Our street's a corner. Soldier. On him in. And there's a guy beating us. Our street's
And
a
then
corner.
some pretty wonky
Soldier.
movements
On him in.
after that.
And there's a guy beating us. Our street's a corner. Soldier. On him in. And there's a guy beating us. Our street's a corner. Soldier. On him in. And there's a guy beating us. On him in.
Here we have Captain Anarchy with very wonky movements that are probably nonsensical. And he also has an aiming reset in this one. The first part of this is just completely nonsensical. He appears to possibly even be off-tracking this first player, and judging by how quickly he returns to trying to fire at him, that seems like the player he intended to target. So that makes his first sharp shot to the left pretty suspicious because there isn't even a player over there. So yeah, once we see 100 clips of Captain Anarchy, where he has suspicious movements in everything that he's doing, it gets to the point where the more reasonable explanation is just that that was an aimbot target switch, and not that Captain Anarchy doesn't know how to play the game. Both things can be true. Here we have strong side with very wonky aim that's chopping back and forth much more sharply than is normal. And the first one clearly happens because the traffic barrier gets in the way.
shot, A dump, they're A dump. Cheek, they're shooting there, guys. Get a set up. Shot, A dump, they're A dump. Cheek, they're shooting there, guys. Get a set up. Shot, A dump, they're A dump. Cheek, they're shooting there, guys. Get a set up.
This first snap to the right there, is probably directly aiming at that player that he can't see. And if we slow this down, we're going to see that his aim bounces off the barrier to the pixel again, like we've seen from a couple different players this tournament who are almost certainly cheating. And it's just about how unlikely it is that a player is naturally just going to adjust his aim around obstacles down to the pixel. You see how this first sharp movement happens as his aim meets the barrier to the pixel, basically. And then goes off target sharply. When if you watch even your own gameplay, your aim doesn't interact with obstacles at all. You just continue trying to aim at your targets in a natural way, with obstacles or walls in the way of what you're doing. Your aim is not going to go wonky or go back and forth bouncing off obstacles to the pixel. And at this point, I might as well repeat that because of the two clips that I talked about again at the start of this video, I know that Strong Side is cheating at this tournament. There's two very reliable, very obvious to me aimbot indicators in that first clip, and then the second clip where he enters the 5 fast consecutive axial movements. Those movements I know are not possible with a thumbstick. So that reminds me that we have 2 new players for the list. First we have Private Malarkey. His clips have definitely been bad enough to make the probable list. And we also have Pilfer. That was one of those names I really couldn't come up with a name. I was pretty happy with Private Malarkey. Both of them are almost certainly cheating, but I haven't seen enough from them yet. Derpski has had some pretty bad clips, and the evidence for him is starting to pile up. And we're starting to see BK show up again. And while I'm becoming more sure that he's cheating, none of his clips have really stuck out to me as being definitive. Here we have SK with very small bounce in his aim that you're not going to see in legit gameplay. His aim is also a bit wonky here, and there's a very fast and small curling movement as he finishes this kill that's pretty suspicious. So there's the first little bounce in his aim. And then during the kill shot, if we slow this down, we can see that it's a very fast half circle movement. It's very fast and very small. And when you have circles in people's aiming, the smaller and the faster that they get, the more likely they are to be an aimbot, until they pass a certain point when it's literally not possible to produce them with a controller. There's a smoothness to the curvature that you really can't get down to that size with a 360 controller because the thumbsticks just aren't sensitive enough. This one is not breaking that limit for half circles. The loop-de-loop from Nated in video 2, that one I know is impossible. That one you can go try on your 360 right now, and you're not going to be able to do it. SK follows that up immediately with aiming movements that become wonky as soon as his target goes behind an obstacle. He's also adjusting his aim with short, sharp, wonky movements, instead of trying to gradually target this player, like someone who knows what they're doing. So he's targeting this player at first. And you can see how his aim goes wonky. And despite tracking this player quite well, suddenly he's wonky. His target goes behind this little corner, and then his aim skips that far. And then his aim is just kind of spastic. SK's movements here at the first player are just a little too crisp, to the point that they're suspicious on their own. And then he snaps to the second player's center line and just doesn't fire at him. With this first target, this just doesn't look like a natural aiming movement to me. It just looks like two separate target locks. You see how this first snap is not a snap and then a lack of aiming input? It's a snap and then a tracking movement. He's snapping to this player and missing, but he's still perfectly tracking him down and to the right. So his aim is just locked in this first position. It's just a lock into a perfect tracking movement, and then it locks onto the head for the kill shot, and then you can see it stutter a little bit. And then after that, we can see him snap to a player's center line, but there's a player above his reticle and below his reticle. And there's just one of those very odd hesitations where he's snapped to a player basically, but it's like he can't make up his mind which one of them he wants to shoot, so he just doesn't do anything. A professional Halo player is not going to have 3 different people he could be shooting and instead input nothing. See how much he hesitates there? Here we have Soldier making movements that are so sharp that his screen appears to be skipping around. except that there's no frame drop, and there's also what's probably a trigger bot activation.
3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out top and puts a flag on.
And that was
3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out top and puts a 3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out top and puts 3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out top and puts a flag.
If you have a 360 and some old theater films, you can go boot that up and see if you're ever inputting turns that are that sharp.
3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out top and puts 3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out top and puts a flag on. And 3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out top. 3-minute skirmish in the
And
middle.
yeah, he's
Carbon
shooting at
comes
this
out.
player.
3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out. 3-minute
And
skirmish
I
in the
mean,
middle. Carbon comes
I
out
wouldn't
top.
usually see this one and say that's a trigger bot activation. I just happen to know at this point that for Soldier that's what it is. But that one's not that bad. So it's just the sharpness with which he's turning.
3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out top and puts a flag. 3-minute skirmish in the middle. Carbon comes out top and puts a flag.
Soldier follows that up immediately with a very sharp stab into the wall, trying to land a shot that's not going to land. And then he has some vertical chop.
And that was mainly due to SK holding top metal. I personally thought he should have jumped into his base, but I guess he likes hugging chick top metal.
I wish.
And that was mainly due to SK holding top metal. I personally thought he should have jumped into his base, but I guess he likes hugging chick top metal.
I wish you guys.
He did know pretty much where this player was, so that aspect of this is not suspicious.
And that was mainly due to SK holding top metal. I personally thought he should have jumped into his base, but I guess he likes hugging chick top metal.
I wish you.
But the fact that he knew where that player was doesn't really excuse how weird this first shot is. And again, this is a movement that we're seeing constantly with these players. And if you watch legit gameplay, you're not going to see people missing into walls and with the sharp chopping back and forth or up and down, or especially returning to the pre-firing position, which is the textbook case.
And that was mainly due to SK holding top metal. I personally thought he should have jumped into his base, but and that was mainly due to SK holding top metal. I personally thought he should have jumped into his base, but I guess he likes hugging chick top metal.
I wish you guys could have seen.
And that was mainly due to SK holding top metal. I personally thought he should have jumped into his base, but I guess he likes hugging chick top metal.
I wish you guys.
Here we have Cypher with the textbook stab, where he's going to make a very sharp stab into the wall, and then his aim is going to hang in one spot, and then return very close to the pre-firing position.
Side running into their base, being the distraction. Now pulling the flag. Side running into their base, being the distraction. Now pulling the flag. Side running into their base, being the distraction. Now pulling the flag.
And after a while, it just kind of becomes obvious that these hesitations after these type of movements are literally the players having to stop for a moment to even assess what's going on with their aim.
Side running into their base, being the distraction. Now pulling the flag.
You can see how right after that movement, there's just a hesitation with no input. And especially when you're playing on a map like this, you're always doing something. You should never stop moving in Halo, right?
Side running into their base, being the distraction. Now pulling the flag.
So it's not just the hesitation with his aim. If you watch this again, his motion stops as well, which it basically needs to in order for his aim to stop and hesitate in one spot.
Side running into their base, being the distraction. Now pulling the flag.
So he has that stabbing movement, and then he has a moment of no input on either thumbstick.
Side running into their base, being the distraction. Now pulling the flag.
Okay. Here we have Captain Anarchy with a couple improbably accurate movements, and then some very sharp movements back and forth that you really won't see on the 360.
Now Carbon's going to be able to push out. Oh, excuse me. It was 4 down for Carbon. Captain Anarchy, he was the one picking up the double kill, and now he is Heaven and Earth. Now Carbon's going to be able to push out. Heaven and Earth. Now Carbon's going to be able to. Heaven and Earth. Now
I mean, on
Carbon's
this
gonna be
first
able to
zoom, there is a hesitation
Heaven and
there.
Earth.
That's weird.
Now Carbon's going to be able to push out.
And
Heaven
then
and
he
Earth.
snaps
Now
right to the
Carbon's
edge
going to
of
be able
this
to push
wall,
out.
and then
Oh,
that wall.
excuse me. It was 4.
And again, that's improbable because it's snapping and not aiming. And it's pretty hard to snap to specific spots on the screen with a 360 controller. So those two movements are a little improbable, but whatever.
Heaven and Earth. Now Carbon's going to be able to push out. Oh, excuse me. It was 4 down. Heaven and Earth.
But the
Now
hesitation
Carbon's
on
gonna
this
be able to
first
push
zoom
out.
is weird.
Oh, excuse me. It was 4 down for Carbon. Captain Anarchy, he was the one picking up the double kill, and now he.
And then the sharpness on
Heaven and
that.
Earth. Now Carbon's going to be able to push out.
The way his aim just
Oh,
kind of
excuse me. It was
bounces
4 down
off
for
that guy very
Carbon.
sharply.
Captain Anarchy, he was the one picking up the double kill, and now he. Heaven and Earth. Now Carbon's going to be able to push out. Oh, excuse me. It was 4 down for Carbon. Captain Anarchy, he was the one picking up the double kill, and now he.
That's reaching the limits of what you're going to see on the 360.
Heaven and Earth. Now Carbon's going to be able to push out. Oh, excuse me. It was 4 down for Carbon. Captain Anarchy, he was the one picking up the double kill, and now he is.
Captain Anarchy again, with aim that is really getting too twitchy for the 360.
Fields, and he's running the flag bottom middle. Flags. Fields, and he's running the flag bottom middle. Flag. Fields, and he's running the flag bottom middle. Flag's going to. Fields, and he's running the flag bottom middle. Flag.
Here we have strong side with some sharp vertical chop. He also misses by quite a bit, yet he's firing twice without adjusting his aim, which is something we're starting to see as common with this aimbot.
It's like they don't believe that strong sides actually do. It's like they don't believe that strong sides actually do. It's like they don't believe that strong sides. It's like they don't
So you
believe
have the
that
sharp
strong sides
vertical
actually
chop.
do.
The same thing for.
It's like they don't believe.
And you can see how much he misses on this first snap. And even a player who wasn't supposedly one of the best in the world is going to make an adjustment of some type after missing by that much.
Believe
Yet
that
he
strong
shoots
sides.
again, just
It's like
slightly
they don't believe that
closer to
strong
the
side-
player.
It's like they don't believe that strong sides. It's like they don't believe that strong.
So it's not just the missing, it's that he doesn't appear to assess that he's missing until the burst completes, which is not really how a good player plays.
It's like they don't believe that. It's like they don't believe that.
He's missing by 5 feet, but he makes no horizontal adjustment until the burst is done. And then he misses by 4 feet and makes no horizontal adjustment until his burst is done.
It's like they don't believe that strong sides actually do. It's like they don't believe that strong sides actually do. It's like they don't believe that strong. It's like they don't believe that strong sides.
He's not making a continuous correction there like you would expect, right?
It's like they don't believe that strong. It's like
Like
they
he
don't
can't
believe
tell
that
he's
strong.
missing this first time.
It's like they don't believe that strong sides actually do. It's like they don't believe that strong sides actually do the same.
Here we have SK snapping close to a player, but missing, yet it's obvious that it's a locked-on off-tracking movement. Then he gets kicked out of scope and reacquires the target almost immediately through a box.
Do the same thing for Carbon that strong side was doing earlier, as you see SK setting up top middle once again. And a kill. Do the same thing for Carbon that strong side was doing. Do the same thing for Carbon that strong.
You can see he snaps
Do
to
the
this
same
player
thing for Carbon that strong.
and he's missing, but his reticle seems locked on to that relative position.
Do the same thing for Carbon that strong side. Do the same thing for Carbon that strong side was doing.
And then he stabs up and down towards that player through the wall.
Do the same thing for Carbon that strong side was doing earlier as you do the same thing for Carbon that strong side was doing earlier as you see SK setting up top middle once again. And do the same thing for Carbon that strong side was doing earlier as you see SK setting up top middle once again.
We can see that as he zooms in at this target, he gets kicked out. And his aim actually goes a little bit to the right before snapping directly to this player. Which is a very improbably accurate movement on the 360.
Do the same thing for Carbon that strong side was doing earlier as you see SK setting up top middle once again. And a kill.
So getting pretty close on SK. These type of things that don't occur in legit gameplay or occur rarely. The perfectly off-tracking players should be somewhat rare. Sharp up and down stabs to players through walls almost never happen. And then near instantaneous perfect kick-out recovery is very rare. So again, these things are happening constantly in SK's gameplay, even in clips that are only a few seconds long. And people can say, oh, you think instantaneous kick-out recovery is rare because you're bad. But no, it was actually pretty rare on the 360. The controllers were bad. And frankly, from some of the stuff that we've seen from SK, I think he looks like he sucks. And the more I think about how difficult it was to find anybody in 2008 that wasn't cheating, it starts to make me wonder if these guys weren't also cheating in Halo 2. Or possibly even Halo CE. Because honestly, I think SK's aim looks terrible. I'm tempted to move SK to the lock cheater list after this clip, but I still haven't seen that one clip from him where I'm like, yeah, that's definitely an aimbot, or yeah, that's the straw that broke the camel's back. Here we see him snapping to a player, apparently on accident, and then even though he snapped to the player on accident, when he zooms in to shoot at the player, his aim goes very wonky, and actually draws a very smooth ellipse. And you're going to see that it's a very wonky movement, but it has a smoothness and a consistency to the speed. And that's what I think gives away this movement. Like I've talked about before, I'm not exactly sure how to explain what makes particular movements suspicious. I just know them when I see them, and I knew this one when I saw it.
They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time and time again on this map.
They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time and time again on this map.
They're right back in. They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time.
They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time.
They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time.
So snaps directly to this player, and then fails to zoom in and shoot at them.
They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time and time again on this map, Chris.
They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time and time again on this map, Chris.
They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time and time again on this map.
They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time.
And then, yeah, if we go through this one slowly, you can see how it's this very sharp ellipse. And you're not going to be able to draw small ellipses that are consistent in speed.
They're right back in the game.
We've seen it time and time again on this map, Chris.
So upon further review, I wouldn't call the snap accidental. I thought SK made the snap right around the time this player was coming into view, but he may actually have been able to see him. That probably is that player, but it's difficult to tell. So this isn't an accidental snap. So this clip is a little bit better, but not by much, because not only are you going to have a difficult time drawing that movement, you're not going to see it in your own legit gameplay. So pretty much given what we've seen from SK so far, it's getting very easy for me to say that given the nature of that movement and the fact that you don't see things like that in legit gameplay, his aim moving around off target there is just about the aimbot trying to target someone else on the map. Here we have a true accidental snap from a player that I can pretty much guarantee is cheating.
They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon Squad. Gotta love this. They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon Squad. Gotta love this. They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon Squad. Gotta. They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon Squad. Gotta love.
He turns around here and just so happens to hit that player. But then we see one of those compensation movements, or double takes.
They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon. They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon.
And you can tell it's a snap, not just because it's pretty crisp, but because it perfectly off-tracks. And off-tracking movements, and the sniper pins that we've talked about before, even for just a few frames, are pretty rare on the 360. In legit gameplay, the reticle floats around pretty freely, and it's not just rare to see it pin, it's rare to see it maintain a relative distance. And here we can see his aim maintain a relative distance from this player.
They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon Squad. Gotta love. They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon Squad. Gotta love. They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind.
You see he's moving right down the ramp. And this player is moving left. He gets the lock on this relative position here. So I counted 7 frames. And then here his aim is starting to move away from this lock. 7 frames of consistent relative distance from this player, despite the fact that they're moving in opposite directions, which is a pretty strong indicator that this had to be a deliberate movement. Pinned aim, locked off tracking, those type of things don't happen randomly on the 360, because minor adjustments were really difficult. Pinned aim in legit gameplay is much more common in MCC. Unless, like I've said before, the player and their target's movement is mirrored. Where if you're both strafing the same direction and shooting at each other, for example, or you're chasing a guy and moving at the same angle as him, in those cases you can see pinned aim on the 360.
The Carbon Squad. They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon Squad. Gotta love the sneak. They can do something with this as Cypher getting behind the Carbon Squad. Gotta love the sneak aggressive push.
Here we have Soldier with a little bit of wonky aim. And there's one of those movements that we're seeing a lot from these cheaters. And that's the sharp stab. And then the hold while the burst completes. And I may have said this before in this video, but I'm starting to wonder if proving this is an aimbot isn't going to be as easy as just showing that this isn't what the natural recoil looks like.
Aggressive push on A side. Aggressive push on A side. But aggressive push on A side. Aggressive push on A side. But
here we have Chig with an extra shot that I would probably excuse. It's borderline. But when people have no shields and they're having trouble shooting at somebody and they're sort of in a compromised position, sometimes they do pull the trigger extra times. So that we can ignore here. But we also see him have a very suspicious movement that probably isn't possible.
Staying alive in that base.
Basically trying
Staying alive in that base.
Basically trying to be the anti.
Staying alive in that base.
Basically trying to be the.
Staying alive in that base.
Basically trying to be the anti.
Staying alive in that base.
Basically trying to be the anti.
And what I'm talking about is this back and forth at the start, and how it's going back and forth at a consistent speed, in a way that I would describe as ping-ponging. So it's the fact his aim goes back and forth at the same speed in both directions. And also, as he switches directions, he adjusts his aim down, but he does so with a small, very rounded movement that no player is going to input there. They're just going to be moving their aim back towards the right. It's probably not even possible to curl these two movements together with this little curve, because you have the aiming movement moving left at one speed, then the curve has its own little speed, and then the movement right has the same exact speed as the movement left, but there's no acceleration to it. And this just isn't something that you're going to be able to do without moving the thumbstick through a wide range of values. And we can see that there's really only two movement speeds in these three movements.
Staying alive in that base. Staying alive in that base.
See how it's one speed left, and then a different speed for the little curve down, and then that same initial speed for the movement right.
Staying alive in that base. Staying alive in that base.
You can't have a movement that completely turns around like that, where you can't see some acceleration or deacceleration of the aiming movement. Obviously, because the thumbsticks are analog, and you have to pass through a bunch of different values to make this movement. And I think it's pretty clear that somehow that range of values is not happening in this clip. You have movement speed 1, movement speed 2, and then movement speed 1 again. Despite the fact you're pushing the thumbstick left, curling it down all the way back to the right. So where's any of that slowdown? Where's any of the acceleration that's supposed to be there?
Staying alive in that base. Staying alive in that base. Staying alive in that base.
So if we go slower here, you can see how this little movement down is just this small little curve down. And again, this is pretty similar to the first clip from Strongside where I talked about how easy it was for me to spot this aimbot because of how Strongside was making those small purposeful adjustments when he couldn't even see what was going on behind the wall at top mid. This is that same type of thing where, yes, Chick has some idea of where this player is going to be, but that's such a deliberate small movement, and that's just not something that you see from players very often when they don't actually know what to expect. So yeah, one more time. Ping-ponging aim back and forth.
Staying alive in that base.
Not a thumbstick. Here we have a very suspicious series of movements from Chig. There's a weird stutter in his aim. He then makes a very purposeful adjustment as soon as a player came into view behind his gun. He then snaps to that player's center line off tracking.
And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to... And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to...
So yeah, there's the
and
first
as we
little
go
stutter,
down to the final
up and
3
down.
minutes, 30 seconds, I want to listen. And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to... And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to
Right
listen.
there.
And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30...
And then we can see he's kind of waiting here at first. And it just so happens that he looks right as soon as this player comes out from behind the wall.
30 seconds, and as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to listen in. And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds.
We can see that this movement probably happens at the exact same time this player comes into view. He's probably in view right there. Very close to coming into view right here behind his gun. So we can see him right there. So we can maybe make the case that he came into view on this frame. One, two, three. So he makes this fairly sharp movement within approximately 3 frames of this player becoming visible.
And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to listen in for... And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to listen in for Carbon. And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to listen in for Carbon.
And then we can see him snap to that player's center line. And he also has a vertical chop there.
And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to listen in for Carbon. And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I want to listen in.
So there, hard snapping to player center line. Or pretty close to player center line.
In for Carbon with...
And then some vertical chop.
And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30 seconds,
So yeah, you have
I want
the
to
stutter
listen in for Carbon with...
snap very close to player center line.
And as we go down to the final 3 minutes, 30
And then a
seconds, I
vertical
want
chop.
to listen in for Carbon with...
Here we have Chig blatantly using an aimbot. You can see he has the snap to player center line. Then he has a very sharp half circle movement that should be rare, but that's okay. But then you can see he gives up on shooting the weak player in favor of shooting a player he didn't even know was there. Snap to center line. At that size and speed, that's getting to be a pretty rare movement. And then obviously there was no reason to stop shooting at that player. You're not going to be able to convince me that in the heat of that exchange, he was able to hear these footsteps and determine that the player was right here and probably coming around this corner at this exact time. And even if you can convince me that he might have heard a player in that general area, you're still not going to convince me that what he heard led him to decide definitely that he needed to try and target that player instead of what he should have obviously been doing, which was not sucking at Halo. This clip is from SK. The reticle does not twitch around like this on the 360.
stairs. That's B. Thurskins on B stairs. That's B. Thurskins on B stairs. That's B. Thurskins on B stairs. That's B. Thurskins on B. That's B. Thurskins on B stairs. That's B. Thurskins on B stairs.
And I think you can see at least one very obvious target lock in here.
That's B. Thurskins on B stairs. That's B. Thurskins on B stairs. That's B. Thurskins on B stairs.
But yeah, the reticle just doesn't twitch and jump around like that on the 360.
That's B. Thurskins on B stairs.
Here we have strong side with some pretty wonky aim. Nothing too bad, but there's an odd hesitation in one of the movements that I'm pretty much only mentioning because at this point I know he's cheating.
Play so far in this series. He has really been the guy. He's basically the catalyst of heaven and earth. He seems to make all these plays happen. Play so far in this series.
And that hesitation
really
is after he gets kicked out the first time. He gets kicked out and then his aim stops right around here. And then pretty much at the same time as he resumes, then he starts moving his aim from there to turn around and shoot this player.
Play so far in this series. He has really
See how his
been
aim
the guy.
stops in that one point,
Basically the play
and
so
then
far
his
in this series.
resume coincides
really
with
been
finishing
the
this
guy.
movement.
Basically the catalyst. Play so far in this series. He has really been the guy. Basically the catalyst of heaven and earth. He seems to make all these plays happen.
Just a weird coincidental movement. And we're starting to see that quite often, where people are doing things like waiting for bursts to finish before they move their aim, or like Z Nightmare on Heretic, where he's maintaining an off-track distance for the exact duration of a burst, and then is making an adjustment, even though the entire off-tracking movement is one continuous adjustment. So we're seeing a lot of things like that, including zooms and movements, coinciding pretty much down to the frame. Not just coinciding with what the player is doing, but with what their target is doing also, in a way that's not natural. Like in this clip where there's no reason for strong side to stop inputting a movement there, but he did stop until the exact same time he started to resume, even though he was planning on turning all the way around to the corner. So I can't remember all the specific examples of that stuff that have been in here, but I'm noticing that pattern. And it's pretty obviously going beyond just players zooming and aiming at the same time. They're missing by wide margins, and then only starting to make an adjustment at the same time that the burst finishes. That aspect is getting suspicious, because in legit gameplay, people are just moving around and looking around and doing whatever they want. They're not making adjustments to whether they're zooming, firing, and moving their aim, and doing these things at the exact same point in time. So here we have Thrust with some movement that's bordering on rubber banding. Also, after he loses track of this guy at P2, his aim starts to move around in a really flowing way. That's not something you typically see in legit gameplay. He takes a real purposeless shot at the start. That could be a trigger bot. His entire team is cheating, so it is a trigger bot. So we're getting into, this clip has several aimbot signatures in it, but the icing on the cake is that he has that movement where he doesn't know his right from his left. So yeah, we have this purposeless shot at a player he's obviously not going to hit. And then as it goes up to P2, he gets confused about which direction to press the thumbstick. This can happen sometimes with how your reaction time works out and what you were planning to do. But we can start to see that the time frames in which this movement happens aren't really realistic. And the way in which it happens is pretty similar from clip to clip in terms of the amount of time that passes between the incorrect movement and then the immediate correction after that. So he can see this guy's to the left of his reticle as he comes up the ramp. He can see him this whole way. And then he was moving his reticle right for what reason exactly? And then here at the end, as he acquires this player for the last time, you can see his aim get really smooth and flowing. And I would say this might classify as serpentine. I'll probably reserve the term serpentine for a more specific movement than this. One that I know people never do with their thumb. Actually, yeah, I would call this a serpentine movement. As he's looking up, you can see his aim doing this consistently. Having one that smooth and consistent on the 360 is very rare. It's off at an angle and there's really only like 2 curves in there. So it's not the type of serpentine movement that I'm going to say people never do. Because when it's straight up and down and you get to like 3 curves in there, you will never see that in legit gameplay. Because people just don't wind back and forth evenly with their thumb as they look up or down. And if they do, it's not going to be a consistent speed. Where the serpentine motion, not only are the curves back and forth at consistent speed, but the vertical speed is not changing either. And making that movement with your thumb where you're not varying those speeds at all basically isn't possible. Based on the fact that I've never seen it in a legit game. You can see how this sharp turnaround is rounded at the bottom. And a quick turnaround like this on the 360 is probably just going to be back and forth sharply. It's not going to have this nice rounded bottom to it. You can just see how nice and round and even this movement is. Which you shouldn't see very often on the 360 because the thumbsticks were trash. And then it's got 1 curve, 2 curves, 3 curves. I'd call this 1, 2, 3. So yeah, with the smooth flowing movements in there, and something that I would get very close to classifying as serpentine, which you'll never see in legit gameplay, that's a pretty suspicious clip. He's not going to jump up to the lock cheater list by any means for that clip alone, but he's almost certainly cheating. Here we have a very sharp movement from thrust. There is a frame drop at the end of this sharp movement. But the frame drop is after that movement. So that first sharp piece of that movement had no frame drop, and then there's a frame drop. And then there's a frame drop after it. But we can see his aim doesn't really move that much once the frame picks up again. So this dropped frame is somewhere in between these two positions, which, having dropped frames at the end of a movement, can contribute to everything looking wonky, and it can also make their POV appear to skip when there are things like objects or walls kind of close in their field of vision. But that doesn't take away from the fact that here to here is a single frame. Which means that this clip is a glitch or an aimbot. You can also see it's kind of a sharp stab up that then does the little roller coaster move, and this happens at the same time he unzooms. Here we have thrust with the textbook stab to a player behind a wall. He stabs right to the player's head through the wall, and then his aim resolves back down immediately. That one's not that terrible because it's not as sharp. His burst doesn't hang at the top, and the movement resolving to the firing position is not that sharp either. So that could be a natural thing that some players do more often than others. But that behavior actually is rare enough for most players that it's worth noting, because this aimbot does that specific movement constantly. But that one's not very bad at all, and that could easily be normal. But then he follows it up with this clip. After he turns around, there's a hesitation in his aim. There's no dropped frames, he just hesitates this much, and then he moves his reticle the wrong direction. And then he snaps to a target lock on a player. So he has this kind of hard snap as he turns around. That's starting to look pretty weird to me as a type of reset. And again, we can see it's not just his aim that isn't moving. He has no body motion. See how there's that split second where he's not inputting anything on either stick? And then after that, moves his aim left at first. That far. Despite the fact that both of these players were to the right. And then we can see that this snap locks so perfectly as an off-tracking movement that the edge of his reticle is basically pinning to this guy's foot. Is this stuff starting to look obvious to you guys yet? Here we see Thrust's aim stuttering around, and it's happening because his teammate is in between him and his target. But when a teammate moves in between you and your target, nothing's really supposed to happen. That doesn't cause your aim to stutter around. Again, this is one of those things that you could actually be a terrible player, and you could review your own gameplay and see that your aim doesn't do anything when your teammate moves in front of you. See how much and how sharply his aim stutters there? And this is happening because the aimbot is trying to target that player around his teammate's legs. So here we have Thrust making a large movement and coming very close to snapping to this player's center line. So this initial snap is quite close to center line. Again, this is going to happen sometimes. And obviously your aim is going to hit player center line a lot. But you're usually not going to see large movements that snap to a center line. And then from here, this is probably a compensatory movement. And I wouldn't classify this one as pressing the stick the wrong direction, because sometimes that just happens when you're trying to go up or down. It's not like those cases where the target's clearly on one side or the other. But here he has a gradual, like, question mark movement. Like that. And it's just how it's a consistent speed. It's very smooth and it's very consistent. And you really don't see those type of movements on the 360 because the thumbsticks just weren't sensitive enough. Here we just have a little wonkiness and some odd hesitation. He knows the player's going to go out of view, and then he just doesn't do anything And then his aim just makes a really sharp movement down right before he dies. Doesn't really make sense. In this clip, he snaps to a player predictively, and then he off-tracks him perfectly. So if we go through this one slowly, you can see that player's muzzle flash there. So you can see him, maybe there, probably not, definitely not. So we can see that at the probably not frame, here's the probably not frame. As we go to maybe, he's starting to make that movement towards that player. And then the player comes into view. So this is a predictive snap down to the frame on this player. And if we go slow again, not only is this a predictive snap to center line, but it finds the center line and then he tracks. Here's the player right here. So he finds the center line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is still the player right here. 6. He finds the center line and then perfectly off tracks for 6 frames. Moves his aim to the left. And then his aim locks at this position. Actually, this position. See how he's perfectly off tracking again there? So he locks there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So another 6 frame lock. So there we had a predictive snap into perfect off tracking, into moving his aim the wrong direction, into perfect off tracking again. So I'm going to add him to the lock cheater list. I've seen enough from this guy. Every single time they show his POV in this tournament, there's going to be suspicious movements. And I can add him to the list up here with the rest of his team. Category 5, the entire team was cheating. So I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but you're not going to see these kind of aiming stabs that snap this sharply to a player behind a wall. And this is an example of one of those textbook ones, where his aim snaps back to the pre-firing position. It's arguably excusable here, because this is a case where a player would want to snap their aim back to the opening at P2 here. It's not having this snapback movement when there's 10 different things that you could have done with your aim after that. But yeah, we have the textbook stab here at the start, and then some vertical chop, and some hesitation at the end as he loses aim assistance. He's also snapping to this second player, but there's an odd delay before he shoots at him, and that's really common with this aimbot too. Here we have Ashes with some textbook vertical pulsing.
Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team? Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team? Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team? Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team?
He also appears to predictively turn to this player, with a lead that's pretty close to being good, and seems to be locked at a relative position.
Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team? Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team? Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team? Stay alive. James, stay alive. Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team? Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team? Stay alive. James, stay alive. What's your team?
Here we see more vertical pulsing. His aim is also jumping around, and he misses the beatdown at the end by a lot, which is just weird. This fast stuttering on the first kill is textbook aimbot behavior. You're not going to see that much, if ever, in legit gameplay. You might see the player die, and then there's going to be a change in the speed of your reticle, but you're not going to see a sharp stutter during the firing movement. And then if we slow this down here, you can see him curl to this player like that. And those movements are very rare on the 360. Again, because the thumbsticks just weren't this sensitive. Here we have an example of what I would like to say is Ash's real aim, but there is a really textbook aimbot signature in this clip. His aiming movements here are getting fast and smooth and down to the scale where they become suspicious. Fast, smooth, or rounded movements tend to be larger. You'll see that stuff happen more often than the larger aiming movements that people are doing. When they're just trying to shoot someone who's right in front of them, you're usually not going to see those smooth, fast, small movements. And then the textbook aimbot signature is the windmill he does. You'll see this a lot, where it is common for a player to windmill and end up on target. The aimbot often windmills to above the player, hits their center line, and then moves down vertically to the target. You see how he windmills to the center line and then straight down. If his reticle had windmilled right to the player, that's normal. But it's this windmill above the player and then straight down. That movement is textbook. And then we can see after that player dies, then his aim goes like this. Something like that. Draws this S pattern. And that's also not something you're likely to see in legit gameplay. When you watch legit gameplay, you're not going to see people practically writing in cursive with their aim. Here we see Ashes snapping to and tracking a player that he can't see, and then he has a snap with perfect off tracking, which again is one of those things that's going to happen, but it's surprisingly rare. So on this first snap here as he goes to the window, right here, we can see that that movement just happens to track this player. And then after that we have this perfect off tracking movement. Here we see Ashes with aim that wiggles back and forth. And then he has that textbook aiming stab to a player behind a wall. When he's first shooting this player, right there, you can see that little wiggle back and forth. Here we have Ashes appearing to be confused about who he should be targeting, in a situation where I don't think that makes very much sense. And this happens after he predictably snaps to and tracks a player. So this first snap here, can't see the player yet. Snaps to a pretty good lead on that first player. Yet the firing movement appears to be at this player above him, but you can also see his aim jump above the first player's head, and then appear to off-track that player. So he's off-tracking this player, and if you say that he was intending to shoot at this first player, why does his aim move up towards the second player? Your Ashes has a little off-tracking movement. That's not really a big deal. But he weirdly doesn't shoot at the first player in a situation where you should have, because of the distance he is from them, and because they're going to bottom mid. And then they're going to go after his teammate who has the oddball. But he doesn't shoot at the first player for some reason. And then he shoots at the second player. But when he does that, there's some vertical pulsing in his aim. This is a very sharp off-target snap for the 360. In this clip, Ash's aim is just kind of wonky. He also fails to zoom his BR correctly. Here we have Thrust with a little stutter in his aim. Here we have Z Nightmare with a small retrograde movement, and this is one of those things that you'll commonly see with this aimbot, and it's an example of one of those movements that when I see them, I'm able to predict that later there's going to be a player in a certain part of the map. Here, as he's turning around, he has that small bouncy retrograde movement in his turn. And seeing one like that is pretty rare in legit gameplay, and that probably happened because there's a player somewhere in that part of the map. Here we have Z Nightmare with two small off-tracking movements. So after this first snap, he off-tracks. And then as he zooms, he becomes inaccurate. But that inaccurate movement becomes another perfect off-tracking. So you can see we have this snap. We have a snap and a very short off tracking. That first one is debatable, but the inaccurate movement after that definitely becomes a perfect off tracking movement. This clip is just an example of the most common way that you're going to see this aimbot snipe. And I believe I've talked about this before, about how legitimate snipes will often have overage in the aiming movement, or they may come up short. But with the aimbot, you're going to see a lot of snapping to the center line. And that's going to become more relevant later as we see more sniping. But so far it's just one of those things that if you watch legit gameplay on the 360, especially at high sensitivities, you're going to see a lot more overage in the aim. And so far in this tournament, I'm not seeing any snipes that look natural. And I also don't know why people were always saying that these guys were playing on low sensitivity, because so far most of it seems to be on mid sensitivity, or maybe even above 5 sensitivity. I haven't seen anybody with noticeably slow sensitivity like a 3 or a 4. And with a 3 or 4 sensitivity, you would see more snipes that go to the center line like that. And yeah, some sniping like that is going to be normal, but that's the only type of snipe that I'm seeing, and there's a reason for that. Here we have Zuwu making just a lot of little sharp movements. This clip is not that bad, but it shows that a zoom that becomes a tracking movement, even when the tracking is this natural, is actually still a little suspicious on the 360 because of how hard it was to do, especially in a situation like this, where the players are moving opposite directions and are both jumping. You can see he zooms and then immediately starts tracking this player's thigh. So this clip serves as more of an example for later. That if these two players were moving this way, and if their aim pins to the player basically to the pixel, it's practically a guarantee that person is using an aimbot. And depends on the length of the pin. Because on the 360, when you're moving opposite directions and jumping, you're not going to be able to pin your aim to a player to the pixel. You never see them happen in legit gameplay past a certain length. Probably because the sensitivity just isn't there. So the small adjustments needed to pin your aim to somebody like that just aren't possible. But we can see that his aim floats around a little bit. It's not strictly pinned in one place. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that we're going to see some pretty suspicious pins in these tournaments. Here we have Zuwu rubber banding with short, sharp movements in a way that you're not going to see on the 360. Those little adjustments are way too sharp. Aiming on the 360 did not look like that. And the idea that somebody would be aiming like that and be perfectly accurate each time is a joke, honestly. Here we have Zulu with a movement that's technically possible, but that you just don't see very often. And I'm talking about this sharp adjustment after the snipe. Here we have Zulu with another one of these sharp movements after a snipe. And then after that, this clip is just an aimbot.
Standing there, is there flag off? He's just standing there. He's running in. Nice! Short flag, short flag. Standing there, is there flag off? He's just standing there. He's running in. Nice! Short flag, short flag. Standing there, is there flag off? He's just standing there. He's running in.
So during this sharp movement, if we slow it down, we can see that it's actually a very small curling movement. You can see how it's a very small curling movement, like that. And that's getting down to the size and speed where it's not going to be possible.
Standing there, is there flag off? He's just standing there. He's running in. Nice!
And then here, as he jumps, we can see a smooth, purposeful retrograde movement, and that's almost always going to be an aimbot. This little downward movement in his aim. Smooth, purposeful retrograde. Here we have Zulu with some wonky aim. He also has the textbook stab. And yeah, we can start to see the way they leave their aim hanging on these missed shots is really consistent from player to player. And we can see that it hangs and then swings out and accelerates a certain way. And that swing out movement is constantly happening as soon as the burst is done firing. And that's the type of thing where I'm talking about things that are happening in their aim are coincidental even though they really shouldn't be. People's reaction to shots that they know they're missing should fall within a wide range of just whatever they naturally did in that moment. It's not going to be this consistent, the aim hangs while the burst completes. And in this clip, we have the textbook stab followed by the return to the pre-firing position with that accelerated swing out. And you can see the swing out happens as soon as the burst completes. The timing of how people move their aim in that situation should vary practically from shot to shot, but we can see there's that real consistent timing and speed to that movement that is common to all of these players, when there's obviously no reason to leave your aim there while the burst completes, especially in this last clip where it's not even clear who this guy's shooting at. If anything, you have to say he was still shooting at the player he just killed, which just means that even more so in that clip, he should have been moving his aim before the burst completed. In this clip, Ash's aimbot clearly predicts this first player is going to die, and then his aim snaps to a second player behind the first player. Here we have Zulu snapping to a player in far less than human reaction time, and then he hesitates to shoot at this player. He snaps to and tracks. His aim also goes wonky as that player moves behind the corner here. So this hesitation has an explanation. If we crunch the numbers on this, so there you can see the player. There's this little red blur right there. And that could be that player's head. Or maybe he could start to see the player's name there. But in the frame before that one, he definitely can't see that player. So maybe there's his head. Definitely can't see him. So if we say he can first see him in this frame, this is at 19. And if we're being generous, we can say that this movement started at 23. And that's 67 milliseconds. So his hesitation here is literally the aimbot compensating for how obvious this was. It's a snap into a tracking movement in basically a third of the reaction time that you're going to see when someone's being quick. But he does that and just doesn't shoot at the guy. But he's already on the lock cheater list, so we'll move on. This clip is an aimbot. He has a smooth movement like an S that would be suspicious on its own, but that movement locks onto a player he didn't see.
Mac was coming up. Mac was coming up. You got a long time. You got over a minute. Mac was coming up. Mac was coming up.
This second player, obviously.
You got a long time. You got over a minute. Mac was coming up. Mac was coming up. You got a long time. You got over a minute. Mac was coming up. Mac was coming up. You got a long time. You got over a minute.
He never sees that player before that. The player's behind his gun. And he does that movement. And then snaps like that into perfect off tracking.
Mac was coming up. Mac was coming up.
Here his aim is wonky and rubber bands a little bit with sharp movements.
Once you guys are pushing. You're pushing me, don't want a shot. Once you guys are pushing. You're pushing me, don't want a shot. Once you guys are pushing. You're pushing me, don't want a shot. Once you guys are pushing. You're pushing me, don't want a shot.
Cloud gets a call out in this clip, so this one could be normal, but we're going to see eventually that he is cheating. So this was probably a snap as he turned around. Even with the call out, I think this one is a little suspicious. His turn is one consistent movement, and then it sharply stops right on the player. Here we have Cloud's aim going wonky because a second player moves between him and the player he was shooting at. And if you've played Halo 3, you know that when this happens, you tend to become inaccurate, and the player closer to you pulls your aim out of whack and kind of pulls your aim around in a smooth way as you're putting in inputs that don't really make sense anymore. But we can see here, we can see that instead his aim starts stuttering around sharply.
On the flag again, on the flag again. I'm gonna shoot him with and L1, and L1. My guys, wait, L1. L1 R1, L1 R1. On the flag again, on the flag again. I'm gonna shoot him with and L1, and L1. My guys, wait.
Especially on that first shot after the second player moves through his reticle, that's going to pull your aim around. But Cloud's aim sharply recovers immediately after that in a way that just isn't natural.
On the flag again, on the flag again. I'm gonna shoot him with and L1, and L1. My guys, wait, L1. L1 R1, L1 R1. On the flag again, on the flag again. I'm gonna shoot him with and L1, and L1. My guys, wait, L1.
Those movements back and forth on that second player are also very sharp, which doesn't really make any sense given the movements he would have been trying for there to target the second player.
L1 R1, L1 R1. On the flag again, on the flag again. I'm gonna shoot him with and L1, and L1. My guys, wait, L1 also.
It's really weird because as he shoots at this second player, every time that he should be getting the aim assistance, his aim is accelerating instead of slowing down.
On the flag again, on the flag again. I'm gonna shoot him with and L1, and L1. My guys, wait, L1.
And if we slow this down, we can pretty much confirm that this is happening because his aimbot keeps trying to jump to the first player. You see how it keeps trying to make sharp movements to that first player? And that's how you end up with this spastic acceleration, when normally he would just be shooting at this player and getting some aim assistance. And he might be missing, but his aim is not going to be accelerating back and forth.
On the flag again, on the flag again. I'm gonna shoot him with and L1, and L1. My guys, wait, L1.
I believe this might be our first clip from Elamite. Here he acquires his target with a sharp triangle, which is weird, and then his aim pops off suddenly when this player goes behind a wall.
I'm pushing up L1 right now. L2. I'm pushing up L1 right now. L2.
He also doesn't give a shit that his brother is cheating on Twitch currently. No Halo Pro I've contacted does. And now we're seeing why. Here Elamite turns and he has a small retrograde movement. And that retrograde movement leads into a movement as he turns around, where he ends up finding this player immediately despite getting a bad call out. You can see as he backs away from the door, he makes a short movement right, as if he changed his mind that quickly that he wanted to turn left instead. Except that it probably was just an aimbot targeting this player, which becomes pretty obvious once you hear that he got a bad call out and still knew where this player was. Here he's getting pretty suspicious. Believe it or not, this minor amount of vertical chop is rare enough that even here it starts to raise my eyebrows. And then after that, he has a narrow, fast cycling movement that's very suspicious. So it's really just those 2 or 3 vertical chops there at the start. Even when they're not that sharp, and there's not that many of them, players really don't just move their aim up and down like that for no reason. And then on the kill there, you can see his aim going back and forth rapidly. And there's just something about the combination of how narrow it is and how the speed stays consistent that it becomes very rare that you see anything like that in legit gameplay. Here his aim is pretty wonky, and in particular there's one down-up movement that's pretty unusual. That last one there as he's shooting at this player at top mid. So given this guy's last clip, where he had that smooth winding movement that locked onto a player he didn't see, we can pretty much guarantee that this player is cheating. There's not much to break down here in this clip, so we can just watch this one and appreciate that it's an aimbot.
Yeah, they know I'm here. On their bubble. Their bubble's one shot. Another one, their toilet. Yeah, they pay straight to P2. It's league. It's all that big. It's they're caught fucking. I got reload. Go Nick. Yeah, they know I'm here. On their bubble. Their bubble's one shot. Another one, their toilet. Yeah, they pay straight to P2. It's league. It's all that big. It's they're caught fucking. I got reload. Cloud is absent. Oh, nice. Go Nick. Yeah, they know I'm here. On their bubble. Their bubble's one shot. Another one, their toilet. Yeah, they pay straight to P2. It's league. It's all that big.
So we're seeing a lot of hesitation, a lot of aiming locks, a lot of shots that are hanging. And then just before this point, we see him snap to this player apparently without realizing it.
Yeah, they know I'm here. On their bubble. Their bubble's one one shot. Another one, the toilet. The toilet.
Backing up, one shot.
Yeah, the picture at the P2.
He's leak.
Two on their street, two on their street, two on their street. Cloud and one shot.
I got reload. Cloud is absent.
Oh, one night.
When he turns to shoot at P2, he also pretty much turns to that player.
Go, Nick.
Yeah, they know I'm here. On their bubble.
Their bubble's one
Nice.
shot. Another one, the toilet. The toilet.
Backing up, one shot.
Yeah, the picture at the P2.
He's leak.
Two on their street, two on their street, two on their street. Cloud and one
I got
shot.
reload. Cloud.
This clip is a textbook case of a snap to center line that becomes a perfect off-tracking movement.
Oh, one nice hit beat.
Cloud.
We can see that he didn't even see this player before that.
Oh, one nice hit beat.
Cloud.
And this apparently purposeless snap
Oh, one nice hit beat.
locks right onto that player's center line.
Oh, one nice hit beat.
Cloud.
So not only does he acquire his target that suspiciously, he's aiming directly at him when he zooms. But then his aim goes off target and then back on target. And that's just the aimbot compensating, trying to make this clip look less suspicious than it is.
Oh, one nice hit beat.
Cloud.
Oh, one nice hit beat.
Cloud.
Oh, one nice hit beat.
Cloud.
Oh, one nice hit beat.
But it's getting to the point where we're seeing that same behavior repeatedly, where there's a very suspicious movement, and then they go off target, on target, even in situations where their aim is already lined up. So it's to the point that this compensation mechanic itself is becoming obvious.
Oh, one nice hit beat.
Here we have Elamite with a movement that's not too bad, but is pretty textbook for the aimbot. There's a little slap back in his aim as he acquires this target, and you commonly see these kind of slap backs, or sometimes it's a quick little bounce around. You'll see these with this aimbot quite a bit. Here Elamite turns around in a single movement and locks onto this player. And again we see that compensation mechanic, where his aim is going to go quickly off target and then back on target, despite the fact that he turns around and lines this up perfectly.
Hey, big two, guys, big two. Big two, man. Hey, big two, guys, big two. Big two, man. All that. Hey, big two, guys, big two. Big two, man. All that. Hey, big two, guys, big two. Big two, man. All that. Hey, big two, guys, big two. Big two, man.
Here we have Elamite with some pretty wonky movement, some of which seems like target switching confusion to me. But his aiming in this clip is also kind of noticeably a series of target locks. I would say there's probably 4 of them in here, where his aim is locking to a consistent position relative to the players.
All that. I'm watching big one. Blue, blue, blue. Stay alive. I can't even. All that. I'm watching big one. Blue, blue, blue. Stay alive. I can't even. All that. I'm watching big one. Blue, blue, blue. All that. I'm watching big one.
That first miss seems like confusion to me.
Blue, blue, blue. Stay alive.
And then there's a little shuffling there as the player goes behind the wall. And that looks like confusion to me.
All that. I'm watching big one. Blue, blue, blue. Stay alive. I can't.
And then we can see 4 different aiming locks in his movements.
All that. I'm watching big one.
This is the first one. The This is the second one. This is the third one. That third one is pretty short, so I wouldn't call that a target lock. But this one is. These aren't that bad because he is moving in the same direction as his target for most of these. If he wasn't, this clip would be pretty suspicious just for these target locks. But because their movement is more or less mirrored for these, they're not quite that bad. But still noticeable in my opinion.
I'm watching big.
Yeah, their movement is mirrored. But he is jumping. He's jumping during this first one. And then he's jumping again during this second one. So actually, yeah, this is quite suspicious. It's more noticeable with the sniper, probably because you're zoomed in. And there's probably more aim assistance for the BR. So you're going to see pinned aim with the BR much more often than you will with a sniper. But even with the BR, in situations where you're jumping, you're going to see the reticle float around in a pretty natural and free way. And here we see that Elamite has these tracking target lock movements while he's jumping. This second one especially, he's making the perfect adjustments to compensate for the fact that he jumps here. And this reticle position stays consistent practically to the pixel. Here we have Cloud making a stab at this player through the wall. And there's that textbook sharpness, and then the hanging aim on this shot. And this is again a clip where I start to wonder if proving that this is an aimbot is just going to require showing that this recoil movement is not natural. Here we have Cloud's aim going wonky because his target moves behind an obstacle. That's a pretty sharp movement when all I needed to do was zoom in. So that's it for video 3. I can't find anybody in 2008 yet who isn't cheating. I'm probably going to come out with a short video next, showing arguably the most obvious cheater from 2008. Although his aimbot is so bad, he doesn't really have these textbook movements that I'm familiar with. So I would say there are some players besides this player who I have more confidence saying are definitely cheating, because you can already start to see that these movements I'm talking about are really consistent between the players. So let's see where the list is at. I probably wouldn't move anybody on this list right now. BK is getting pretty close to moving up. Derpski is continuing to show up with clips that are pretty bad. Private Malarkey is cheating. I just haven't seen the definitive clips yet. Cypher probably cheating too, but I'm fine leaving all of those players there for now. And then for probable, we're going to add Cloud and Elamite. Cloud and Vegemite Liar. It's a play on words. So yeah, everything has been from just a few hours of tournament gameplay so far. So expect some more videos. A lot more videos. And after I'm done assembling all of the suspicious clips, then we're going to start looking at specific things and really showing how impossible they are. And hopefully we're going to find some legit gameplay from the tournaments. But honestly, I'm not seeing that happening at this point. I've basically narrowed it down to like 2 or 3 players in 2008 who are even possibilities for not cheating. But again, just about any legit gameplay can be studied to prove this stuff, in my opinion, because the movements we're talking about don't really have anything to do with skill. They're wonky, strangely accelerated movements that all of these players share like almost exactly. And people are going to say, oh, they're just missing like that because their thumbs are that much better or something. But as soon as you have a few of those clips that prove that some of those players are using aimbots, it's pretty obvious that you're just kind of coping. See you next time.